So welcome everyone. I'm Tanya Craddock. I'm the Executive Director of Sask Soil. And for those of you who are new to Sask Soil, we are a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to advancing agricultural systems that improve the land and environment for future generations. We are proudly 100% funded through memberships, programs, sponsorships, and the revenue that we get from events that we host. If you'd like to support our mission, our annual memberships are available for $50 per year. We bring our vision to life through a variety of events, including our annual conference in February, as well as hands-on workshops and field days throughout the year. This summer, we're hosting a number of field days across the province, July 21st in Ceylon, July 22nd in Bladworth, and August 1st in St. Victor. Registration is now open at sasksoil.ca, and we'd love to see you there. Tonight's webinar is funded partly by Farmers for Climate Solutions. The FARM program is free to join and offers independent online learning, workshops, mentorships, and implementation follow-up for nitrogen management, cover cropping, and advanced grazing systems. You can create an account at farmlearninghub.ca. Tonight, if you have any questions during the presentation, please ask them as they come up. If you just type them into the Q&A section, we will go through them as you ask them. And without further delay, let's get going. Troy LaForge began his agricultural career in 2000 in central Alberta as a consulting agronomist. He is from Swift Current, where he has consulted agronomically with growers since 2003. And in 2009, he and his wife purchased a farm and began LaForge Farms Limited in the Cadillac area. He and his family worked to integrate a progressive no-till commodity crops and seed crop business alongside of a cow, calf, and farm-raised beef business. He has a degree in agriculture from the U of S, and he is the head agronomist for the RACS Petroleum Ultimate Yield Management Institute, a crop consulting service encompassing 6-factor agronomy. His passion is for seeing success both in productivity and profitability through planning, implementing, analyzing, and research process. Troy, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. I'm just going to, Tanya and I were working on my abilities to present here. I'm going to make sure we can do this here. Okay, we got the right one up, Tanya?
I don't see anything yet.
Let me try again. We got the right one?
No, I don't see your screen yet.
Okay, I am going to close my PowerPoint again and I'll reopen. I don't know why it's doing this to us. 2 seconds.
Technology is great when it works, but we struggle when it doesn't.
Okay, oh, here we go. Okay. We got it now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Just going to put into presenter view. Okay, well, thank you everybody for attending this evening. And as Tanya said, if there's a question as we're going along, please feel free to type it into the Q&A part here. And at the end, I think if there's sort of a wrap-up number of questions as well, we'll go for some time there as well. So as Tanya said, I'm Troy LaForge. We started a farm in 2009, and at the end of the day, one of the things that I've been really passionate about is improving productivity on our farm over the years. And something came to me quite a long time ago, and it's this adoption of high carbon systems concept. And when Tanya asked me if I'd like to do this, it was I was keenly interested because it is something that is not easy to explain, and this actually gives me a little bit of a platform and time to show a little bit more of how I'm thinking about this and where my thinking goes to each day. So tonight we're going to basically go through 4 main areas. Number 1, we're going to define what is exactly high carbon in a system. I'm going to use some examples of high carbon rotations and some examples that might actually work in different parts of the prairies. And then what would be some of the benefits that come from implementing these rotations that I've seen personally on my farm, and some research that we've done with our ultimate yield research as well in our agronomy group. And then some of the challenges that we've faced trying to implement these that may not be completely unique to high carbon, but definitely some things that we have had to work through going forward. So, and then again at the end, there will be some time for some questions. So if I was to define a high carbon system, the first thing that I like to talk about is the crop choices we have. And if I just kind of bring that down to a real user-friendly version, it's cereals, pulses, oilseeds, and then there are perennials that we generally talk about in our hay crops, alfalfas, and grasses. At the end of the day, what really defines a high carbon system is what we're choosing to put on the land. And this is a chart that I reference. It's very easy to think about the different crop choices we have when we have this to use. And a lot of this was taught to us, went through my degree at the University of Saskatchewan, and a lot of this was taught to us in our microbiology classes on the different carbon to nitrogen ratios we get out of different crop residues. And so in this chart, they talk about the carbon to nitrogen ratio of all the different crop choices, should say some of the crop choices. And really what you're seeing on the left is all your different crop choices. And then on the right where it says C/N ratio, Tanya, can you see my arrow when I'm highlighting around something?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
You can. Good. So here we have the C/N ratio on the right-hand column. And as you go down, you see that you have different ratios. And rye straw, as an example, is 82:1. So that means that you've got a lot of carbon for 1 nitrogen. Your carbon nitrogen, you have 82 pounds of carbon for 1 pound of nitrogen. So it's a high C/N ratio. And a couple of examples that I like to point to, wheat straw, something everybody commonly grows, and pea straw. So when we think about wheat straw, it has an 80:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. And again, this chart, by the way, is produced by the USDA. And pea straw has a 29:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. And what's really important there is wheat straw being 80:1 can take quite a bit longer to break down in the soil. And pea straw being 29:1 can break down quite quickly in the soil, i.e. it doesn't take a lot of nitrogen to break it down. The narrower that ratio is, basically the quicker it's going to break down. And as we come further down that chart and we look at things like beef manure, 12:1, if you think about spreading some beef manure on the land and then you seed it a crop, by the fall, you might have a hard time seeing that. Whereas if we go into a field that has got a lot of wheat straw on it, by the fall, we will generally still see a lot of that wheat straw because it hasn't broken down and basically gone into the soil system. And so when I'm defining a high carbon system from this perspective, what I'm really talking about is the above ground inputs that create soil armor. And we're going to talk a little bit later on why those inputs are really important. But a high carbon system, generally speaking, is going to focus on getting more of the high C/N ratio crops into rotation, basically to build more carbon in the soil. The other way that I like to think about high carbon systems is what's going on under the ground as well. And so here we have a chart looking at rooting systems, and we have all our major crops from wheat, peas, chickpeas, lentils, canola. We've got some of the perennials, alfalfas and fescues. And if I was to just look at the wheat chart as an example, what this is depicting is the percentage of the roots at each depth that we would see. And so along the top, you have 0 to 1, so that would be 100%. And along the left-hand axis is the depth in centimeters to which you would see those roots. The more dots you have in an area, the more roots tend to be at that particular depth. And just a couple of examples that I really want to point to. Lentils, which are so near and dear to Saskatchewan producers' hearts. We grow a lot of them here. What we see is we actually have a lot of roots that basically accumulate somewhere in this 50 centimeter range. So basically somewhere in that kind of 2 foot range is about where you're starting to see most of your roots. And basically we don't see much that goes beyond a meter. If we look at something like a perennial crop of alfalfa, what we start to notice is that we get a lot more roots at depth. And what's important about that is that the more roots we get and the more roots we get at depth, the more carbon we are going to put into that soil below ground. And what's important about this is really what we're talking about is below ground inputs or soil structure. And so when I'm thinking about a high carbon system, I'm looking for more crops that have more roots at more depth. And these are the things that are going to start building up the soil aggregates. If I get good aggregation in the soil, below surface that is, then I get more air in my soil. When I get rainfall or snow melt, I have places in that soil for that water to flow through, and I can get good infiltration rates. So I'm trying to do a lot of things in trying to build a high carbon system, but these would be the two major things I look at. What I'm doing above ground with my seed-N ratios of the different straws, so I can have resiliency on the surface and soil armor, and then things that can basically get into the soil and help build the aggregates in the top layer. But then I'm also looking at the roots for what I can do underground. Another way to look at how to define a high carbon system would to be looking at some research. And if you've ever listened to me speak a little bit about high carbon systems, you're probably familiar with this research. And this one that I like to quote is from Dakota Lakes Research Farm in South Dakota, Pierre, South Dakota. And what we're going to look at is the impact on winter wheat yield when you look at different rotations or different systems. So in this first chart, what we see is that in the year 2002, we are studying 2 different rotations. The first one we would call the high carbon rotation. It's corn, pea, winter wheat. So what's happening there is 2 out of 3 years in that rotation, you have high carbon crops, high seed-N ratio crops, being corn and winter wheat, and you have 1 lower carbon crop, peas. In a low carbon rotation, the second one noted here, soy, corn, pea, winter wheat, you have 2 high carbon crops in 4 years, and you have 2 low carbon crops in 4 years. So basically you've got 50% high carbon, 50% low carbon. So what you end up with is this change in the percent of carbon that is being acquired in the land, whether it's from the roots or on the surface of the soil. And you end up with 2 different systems to research. In 2002, they received 6.4 inches of precipitation. And what ends up happening in the high carbon rotation is they get 56 bushels to the acre of winter wheat versus 28 bushels of winter wheat in the same year with the same inputs, just a different rotation. Very, very significant difference. And what's starting to be evident, and this is, so 2002 in this research is after they have implemented these rotations for 10 years, they start to pick up on some big differences. 2005, they go the other direction and they have a wet year. So in 2005, the same 2 rotations, corn, pea, winter wheat versus soy, corn, pea, winter wheat. They get 23.7 inches of rain, lots and lots of rain. And just to mention, this precipitation is actually from the time they take their pea crop off in both rotations until they take the winter wheat crop off. That's the total precipitation received for that crop. So 23.7 inches. And in the high carbon system, they get 92 bushels to the acre. And in the low carbon system, they get 57 bushels to the acre. Forward a year to 2006, they look again at the high carbon rotation, the corn, pea, winter wheat, versus that same low carbon rotation. They get 7.9 inches of rain, and they basically get a doubling of yields again. So you get 60 bushels in the high carbon rotation, 29 in the low carbon rotation. The importance of this is we're basically getting somewhere between a 60 to 100% yield increase only by changing the rotation. So implementing this type of a system after 10 years starts to really show some big benefits in probably water holding capacity, water infiltration, and ultimately yield. On our farm, one of the reasons that we have started implementing these high carbon rotations, and on some of my fields, I think I'm entering year 5 or 6 right now, and we're already starting to pick up on some soil quality differences. We have not actually seen rain even this high in recent years. We're hoping that we're going to start picking up on some of these, but these are the reasons that we are starting to look at these high carbon rotations a lot more intensively on our farm. So a couple ways we can define those high carbon systems. Again, we can look at above ground inputs, below ground inputs, or some of the straight research that comes out looking at these rotational systems. So what are some examples of high carbon rotations that we could utilize on the prairies, basically from Manitoba right through to Alberta? And the big idea, or to really just bring it down to basics, you're really trying to change what we have traditionally been taught, which is a cereal broadleaf type rotation, which is what we looked at in that last slide of research. Changing from a cereal broadleaf to a cereal broadleaf type of rotation. And that goes against some research, some agronomic wisdom in the past. And so what would it actually look like to do that and still remain agronomically balanced in trying to get, weeds, disease, and insect pressure to not be an issue for us? Well, if I look at some of the basics for Western Canada, I came up with a few examples of what could work. This is one we're actually investigating on our own farm right now. We've been trying to grow some oats. I grew my first crop of oats in about 10 years last year, and I have that right next to some barley stubble, and we've put durum on the whole thing. So one example would be oats, wheat, canola. Probably a pretty good example of a high carbon rotation if I was growing somewhere in the black soil zone where oats is a more common crop. Another one, this is one we're also evaluating on our farm. Last fall, 2024, planted my first winter wheat crop on our farm. And my plan is to put barley back on that stubble next year. Benefits of this rotation, we grow winter wheat, then we grow barley, then we grow flax. That barley should not have a problem with volunteer winter wheat because it needs to vernalize. I go in there, I do my burn off in the spring. I should kill any volunteer winter wheat that's there. I can grow my barley and not have contamination issues. A lot of our crops are seed crops, so I definitely can't have contamination. And then I can put a flax crop on there as a lower carbon crop, start again. Another one, this one I would say would be common to say West Central Saskatchewan. Let's call it basically from somewhere up around the Kerrobert area down to probably Swift Current. Big canary seed growing area over through that Kindersley, Rosetown area would be kind of the heart of it. And we could do canary seed, durum, lentils. Canary seed volunteer is quite easily controlled in the durum. And then we can come into a lentil crop, and basically that would be our low carbon input in a 3-year perspective. This one I was thinking of for some of the guys in the Southeast. I've run into a few guys over the years that talk about growing millet in the Southeast. They get a little more heat units. Millet is a C4 plant. You can grow millet, then put your barley on it, because again, you can control volunteer millet in barley, and then grow your pea crop again and reset to the start. This is one, if you're in an area that you can take and utilize a lot of feed barley, maybe yourself, or you've got feedlots, hog barns, these kinds of opportunities in your market, then we would grow the wheat, being able to grow either wheat or durum, and then grow feed barley. They actually like if you have a little bit of volunteer wheat or volunteer durum in your barley, they'll take that. And then you could put, say, mustard, canola, flax, an oil seed on top of it. And then the last one, this is one that we have implemented on our farm in the past, which is barley, wheat, chickpeas. A lot of people look at that and go, well, aren't you going to have troubles with volunteer barley? When I do this, I pick a Clearfield wheat or a Clearfield durum, and then I grow a pulse crop thereafter. So we've got the ability to control volunteer barley in the wheat. I can use an IMI, then I can rotate into a pulse crop, and I won't have issues with carryovers of the IMIs that we've seen through these dry years. And then again, we grow the chickpea, and we have a reset, and away we go again. If we look at these basics, picking 2 or 3 of them and stacking them gives us the ability to get to higher carbon, A, but B, also stacking, say, choice 1 and choice 3, doesn't matter, then gives us marketing options too, where we're doing this with oil seeds and pulses, and we're varying the different types of cereals that we're using. The big idea being that we are still trying to remain agronomically diverse from a pest control perspective, but still moving forward with trying to improve the amount of carbon in the soil, to improve different things like aggregation, water infiltration, soil armor, all those things. Some additions that we can throw in to help along with these high C rotations, perennial grasses and legumes. This is an opportunity to look at things like perennial grasses and legumes for grazing. It could be from a grass seed or perennial legume seed perspective. That would be alfalfa seed, grass seed. These are all options that we can use if we can get these in. The reason we want these additions in, perennial grasses and legumes growing basically 365 days of the year, are building carbon in our soils longer and more often. And if you look at a lot of the research, they're actually quite key to improving carbon content of soils, is getting the perennials implemented in our rotation. So it would be taking some of those basics above up in here, and then adding in a sequence where you'd maybe do 3 years of a perennial grass legume mix. The other thing, looking at C4 plants, if we can add C4 plants, everything except for the millet up here, everything up here is basically a C3 crop, and C3s don't put as much carbon in the soil as a C4 plant. In a general sense, there's probably some nuances there, but generally speaking, C4 plants put more carbon in the soil. And then the other one is some grazing animals, and I think that the whole cover crop soil health movement has definitely talked a lot about the grazing animals and how that can also provide more carbon back into the soils. And so, yes, we can talk about more of those sequences in our rotations as well. On our own farm, we are working on perennial grasses and legumes and C4 plants, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on as well. So let's just spend a few minutes talking about some of the benefits of high carbon rotations. One of the big ones that I think everybody is struggling with these days is weed control costs. We've got some really nasty pests that start showing up, and through these dry years, I think the big one, if I talk about West Central Saskatchewan, it seems like this problem has radiated out into other parts of the prairie because we have had so many dry years. And things like kochia, wild oats, we are really seeing large reductions in those problems when I get an implementation of these high carbon rotations. So why is that? Well, this is a picture of our durum crop that I took yesterday. It's a little on the late side, and yes, it was extremely dry up until this weekend. We finally caught 0.4 of an inch of rain. But what we're using is this mulch that's in between the rows. And this just happens to be a spot where my drill actually went a little bit wide. It's instead of being the 7.5-inch spacing, it's 10, but it really shows how much carbon or high carbon straw that we're laying on top of the soil. So this is Durham, Clearfield Durham on barley. And we didn't need to spray wild oats on this land this year. Basically very hard to find a wild oat on this land anymore. And we are finding every year we're using less and less and less wild oat products. There is opportunity also with this mulch if I get it right, and you can still see little bits of bare dirt out here. If I get it right, probably won't be having kochia problems going forward because kochia loves bare ground. And if I can eliminate my bare ground, probably the last place I'm going to have kochia is going to be right around my edges and approaches, different places where I end up with some bare ground. So weed control costs are definitely decreasing on our farm because of this. One of the other big ones that I spoke about is water infiltration. And this is basically the same picture, just looking straight down now. Basically I took the first picture on the last slide. I stood up and I just took a shot looking straight down on that same area. And again, what you're seeing is this trash that's in between my plants. And when we get rain, we have all these shock absorbers on the soil. And so when I want to get good water infiltration, I have to slow down raindrops. They need to hit straw and not bare dirt. If I can get the rain to hit the straw, I can actually get it to go in the soil more effectively. And I was actually talking to one of your former board members a couple of days ago, and we were talking about this issue. And he said, somebody asked him, how much rain did you get? And he said to them, all of it. And I had to think about that for a second. I went, yeah, good point, right? Like no matter how much you get, you want all of it to go in. You don't want it to run off, and you don't want it to basically cause the sealing off of the soil when we have bare dirt. Basically, you get these little micro explosions on top of the soil, and basically it will cause soil to seal off the top layers, whereby we miss our opportunities for water to go down through crevices, through the aggregates and what have you. So water infiltration is something that we are really, really getting focused around, especially through these dry years. Really, really essential every drop we get that it actually goes in the ground. And some things that happened this spring, we had a lot of snow, and we actually saw where we had very little pooling with similar snowfall to what we've had in the past, and we had pretty good moisture last fall. So we think this is actually starting to improve on our farm, that the infiltration is generally increasing. But the big thing there, just these high carbon rotations end up building good soil armor. We get good soil armor, we can start to get better infiltration. Long term, we should get better aggregation in our soil. Not seeing that in a large way yet, but this is one of the reasons that we're doing it, is better water infiltration, and we're starting to see some of that happen. Again, if you've ever seen me speak on this before, water infiltration, there's some really good videos on YouTube that you can go watch. I'm not going to try playing this tonight. Every time I try playing this in a presentation, it doesn't work, and it causes confusion. So type Nebraska rainfall simulator demonstration into YouTube. This Paul guy from the University of Nebraska does a great job explaining it. It's about a 7-minute video, and basically just talks to the benefits of different kinds of rotations and how you'll get not only runoff increase or decrease, but also infiltration increases and decreases based on different systems. And basically high carbon or high residue systems, you can see some great benefits. But again, I would point you to YouTube to go watch some of that. Some of the other things that we have seen that are really important, benefits of high carbon rotations, is when we look at soil temperature. And basically what we see are two things. If we can really increase the amount of residue on top, we can decrease the amount of water that can evaporate out of our soils, and we can increase nutrient availability because nutrients are water soluble. Therefore, if we have more moisture longer, we have more nutrients getting to the plants. So the first piece of research that I want to show you, this is actually from Gull Lake, and it's from our Ultimate Yield Research Group last year. And what we did a little trial to look at residue levels and what effects that had on soil and on yield at the end of the day. So this graph is showing the average soil temperature taken at 5 centimeters or 2 inches. And basically all we did was we had 3 different treatments. So treatment 1, which is notated as the gray bar, is low residue. And basically it was no residue spread. It was as the field was when we started the trial. Medium, the grower had some straw bales left over, and we used a bale shredder, and on each of this plot is replicated 3 times. Each of the medium plots, we would spread 1 bale on the whole plot. And then high was taking 2 bales and spreading them on each of the 3 plots. So we have 9 blocks, 3 that had no residue, 3 that had 1 bale on each of the plots, and then we had the high, which was 2 bales on each of the plots. So we end up with some really neat data. And first thing we looked at was what was the soil temperature in each situation. So on the left-hand side, we measure anywhere from 18 degrees Celsius all the way up to 21.5. And what we see is where we applied no residue in the trial last year. We had basically soil temperatures. This is midday soil temperature of about 20.5 degrees Celsius. And where we had some straw spread, 1 bale per plot, we got down to 19.5 degrees, dropped it about 1 degree. And then where we spread 2 bales on each of the plots, we got the temperature down between 18 and 18.5 degrees Celsius. And so these are significant differences when you look at the soil temperature alone. Really important stuff, especially if we are trying to enhance microbial activity, which helps to cycle nutrients. If we're trying to keep water from evaporating, keeping soils cooler, again, a big benefit. So these are really important things. And just a note, these temperatures are taken as the durum is growing. So we already have some green canopy cover that is also helping. If this was earlier in the season, as the durum's just coming out of the ground, these temperatures could have actually had a greater level of variation. So then the season's done and we come to harvest, and we wanted to know what would happen if we just changed the residue level and what would happen to yield. We look again, this is average durum yield by residue treatment. And on the left-hand side, we have our yields anywhere from 21 to 29 bushels to the acre. Again, along the bottom, the low residue, no residue spread, medium, 1 bale, high, 2 bales. And what we see is a nice little yield curve. We basically get 24 bushels to the acre where we had no residue, up to 27 where we increased residue by putting 1 bale on each plot, and a little bit more of a yield kick up to 27.5. Not significantly different from the 1 bale per acre, but we see some benefits from increasing the amount of surface residues. And so pretty excited about that data, and we're going to be following this one through for another 2 seasons. So first look at it with just the application of residue on the top. We're pretty excited about that, and that would be another benefit we could show from high carbon rotations. So one of the things that I do want to talk about, though, is there are definitely some challenges that come from from having high carbon rotations. And things that we early on started finding trouble with was if we didn't seed between the rows, we had issues with things like hairpinning. We could have delayed maturity because it would maybe only germinate 3/4 of the crop, and then we would have a delayed germination of the remaining 25% over the next couple of weeks. And so we'd be waiting on crops and have delayed maturity because of that. And so one of the things that we did early on was to really start looking at different technologies that we could apply on our farm. And in the picture on the right-hand side, what you're seeing is actually the disc opener that we chose. And I'm going to put a little bit of a plug in for K-Hart Industries at Elrose. I talked to Kim Hartman as a result of having a conversation with one of our producers in the Rosetown area that had started using these openers. And what they are is they're called an undercut disc opener. And you've got two discs here. And the leading disc, the bigger one that you see on the right-hand side, if a straw happens to get under the disc, the one that's on the left or the second disc grabs it and kicks it out. And it's all on a bit of an angle. So it actually, the reason it's called an undercut, it undercuts the soil on a pretty aggressive angle and basically really reduces hairpinning significantly. The other thing we started doing was a lot of angle seeding. We actually went away from that a little bit this year, and I think we're going to return to it because my emergence is still not what I want. And so for us, seeding between the rows on a 7.5-inch row spacing means that we need to angle seed. It's pretty hard to consistently get between the rows on a 7.5-inch spacing. So whatever technology you have on your farm, if you're going to go into these high carbon rotations, I would recommend that you figure out how to seed between the rows, either with angle seeding or a high accuracy GPS system, probably sub-inch accuracy, minimum 4-inch accuracy. So this is a challenge, but we have solved a lot of that with the opener and by doing some of this angle seeding, which basically puts us between the rows about 90% of the time. So a couple of things that we had challenges with early on, and this isn't completely solved, but I would say we are a long ways along on this one. And this particular technology, plus getting on the angles or seeding between the rows, absolutely critical to making this work. There's going to be higher residue loads. You have to get under it and get good seed to soil contact. So here's our drill, and I'm just going to play a quick video. And so what you're seeing there is basically we have some very tall stubble. This is barley stubble that I'm seeding durum into. It's actually the field I took the pictures from. And this is a video of us seeding back in early May. And I'll tell you, one of the other things that we came upon this year is when we have this high residue load, we end up with a bit of an issue where you can't see what the drill's doing. And one of the things that is absolutely critical and essential, and we ended up with a bit of a problem on about 40 or 50 acres on this field, we had an element go in our linkage. And basically I had a wing that wasn't seeding properly because of it. Equipment tuning has got to be right to the very top before you go to the field. If something happens, it can be extremely hard to actually see it happening out in the field behind you. And fortunately, we actually had some green feed stubble on this field. And once I got onto the green feeds stubble, I could see this wing was having issues penetrating. Went back and looked, and yeah, we had some linkage issues. So making sure your equipment is in top shape. You are not going to have the ability to see things as easily when you basically can't see what the drill's doing back there because of this tall residue that and amounts of residue around the openers. It changes things. So really important, and it has been a challenge this year that we came upon. So I've got this 40 or 50 acres that has taught me a lesson. Okay, so one of the other ones, I talked about the ability of weeds to be better controlled, but I also want to talk about this stubble. And I'm actually looking for some producers that can tell me better ways to spray. I've got a few ideas in my mind of what we could potentially do here, but one of the things we are really struggling with when you look at these tall residue loads, and basically we run a stripper header with our disc drill, what you create is actually barriers to get the spray down into the crop. And this is actually a picture from this spring. We had some real trouble. So actually this is after I'm done seeding my durum into that tall barley stubble. And because I'm trying to focus on carbon inputs on the surface as well, taller crops I'm actually interested in as long as they stand. but we actually had troubles. And if you look in the tracks of the drill, you can actually see some green plants in there. This was burnt off, I believe, about 2 weeks prior to this picture. And we actually had a lot of barley, volunteer barley, that didn't die in the burn off. And we actually had to come back and do a second burn off this spring. And so really struggling with this barrier of all this tall straw and getting enough active ingredient on growing plants when we're trying to control them. And so, yeah, it is a challenge. And it's basically at this point, it's water volumes, surfactants, and the best actives that we can find for the problems that are in front of us. And it is a challenge. I don't want anybody going into this and saying, oh, yeah, just jump in, everything's going to be good. Burn off, lots of guys like spraying 3-5 gallons an acre. What we're finding is we're probably going to have to be at 10 gallons when we're on fields like this. If we've got, say, some lentil residue, or pardon me, lentil fields, pea fields, chickpea fields, those kinds of things, probably going to be a lot easier just because basically that residue is much shorter and we don't have the problems. So this is a bit of a challenge when we've got all this straw in the way. One of the other ones I talked about was trying to get some of the C4 crops put in place. And one of the things that we did on our farm to basically start working with this challenge was a couple of years ago. We had been using grazing corn on the farm, but I wasn't completely happy because of some I couldn't control certain aspects of the seeding. I was getting it custom done. Guys did a great job of coming in and doing it, but I wanted to do trials on seed rates. I wanted to do different varieties, all these sorts of concepts. So we actually started, we bought our own planter for doing corn, and that allowed us to basically do our own grazing corn when we wanted it. And it does need to be put in timely because it's a long season crop, the corn. But it has also given us some other opportunities. And so basically what we're doing this year is we've got 40 acres of corn planted. 10 of that is actually grain corn, and we're going to try growing grain corn. One of the things I want to do long term on our farm is implement corn as a rotational crop. So when I'm looking at those 3-year sequences that I mentioned earlier on, one of the things you didn't see in there was corn. We are getting a larger and larger feed market with feedlots advancing further into Saskatchewan every year, more hog barns, more opportunities for feed crops. I believe there's an opportunity for us to do more corn from that perspective, but also to get a C4 crop that will put more carbon into our soils. So one of the challenges in doing that is getting planters to work. And basically, I'll just play this quick. We went out, we purchased a little 135 or 150 horse front wheel assist tractor, whatever it is, and a 30-foot planter. This is actually planting for a neighbor. We started doing a little bit of custom work 2 years ago. And yeah, so this is one way that we are trying to work on getting C4 crops into our rotation. Some of the challenges with doing that, this is actually a picture of our corn crop yesterday. I went out and took this picture, and this is seeded into strip barley, and basically right adjacent to that durum I was showing you earlier. And so here's our corn crop coming up. Works pretty good. It's an no-till planter, but if you start looking closely, you start seeing some gaps. And because we don't have that undercut disc opener technology, we do see a little bit more hairpinning going on in our corn crops. And so this is another challenge that we're trying to meet. We do have some row cleaners for that planter, and I think next year we're probably going to start putting those on. I've been told by certain no-till guys in the States that they can cause more harm than good. But I think in our situation, we are going to start trying them. And basically a row cleaner is the same as the wheel rakes on the side of a bale pickup. They just use them in reverse instead of trying to move residue into somewhere. You're trying to remove it from in front of the disc. And so I think this is a way that we're going to be trying to get better corn planted. Ultimately, my goal with this is to have a grain corn crop. We tend to be getting these longer, hotter summers, and the C4 crops I think can handle more of that. And I'm hoping we can basically just have a different market as well, and then ultimately get that aggregation and more surface residue. That corn residue on the surface, what I've seen, that it seems to last for 4 and 5 years. So it gives us some really good long-term soil armor. And just again, if we can do some of this, one of the other things that I see is that we're probably going to be able to reap the value of some of our high value cash crops more often: lentils, peas, canola, flax, name any of those lower carbon crops. And I think if we've got good aggregation, water holding capacity, when it comes time to grow those higher value cash crops, we're actually going to have better results. So these are some of the things that I think we're going to see going forward. Haven't seen that yet, but I think these are the challenges that we need to meet. And the last one is just keeping your sanity. As you can see, it's there's a lot of things we are trying to do, and there are days that you will be pulling your hair out wondering, why am I doing this? And you get through the seeding season and it's time to reevaluate again. And honestly, when I look back over the last 5-6 years, probably since we started really looking at this, there's been some tense times that, we had maybe some high hairpinning, or we didn't get quite the crop we thought we would get, but everything seems to be coming in the right direction finally. And I think it's getting the right sequences in our rotations. I think it's getting the right technologies. And I think going forward, we're just going to keep learning the benefits of these. And hopefully, if we can kind of get over that 10-year hurdle that Dwayne Beck talks about in the research, I think we are going to see some really good benefits to our yields at the end of the day. So, and the end of the day, keep your sanity. But I hope I've presented enough things to everybody tonight that you can actually get a good feel for what the high carbon rotation looks like. With that, I'll say thank you and open it to questions. This is my family. We took this picture last year. My eldest son, second one from the left, was graduating last year. We took this out in some of our native grass. We also work on some rotational grazing systems, and we got a little bit of rain early on last year and had some great grass, and real nice picture there. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. And Tanya, I'll open it up to questions.
Sure. Just a reminder, if you have a question, please type it into the Q&A section. And I will read it out. I'm going to start with one. How do you effectively measure change in soil organic carbon over time, and what indicators or tools are most reliable?
So one of the things I learned early on, being an agronomist over my career, is that soil samples are just one of the simplest ways that you can measure that. And one of the things that we've seen on our farm, just going with the no-till practices, more cereals, and measuring that on a year-by-year basis, we've definitely seen some increases in organic matter. When we bought our farm in 2009, I think the worst organic matter I had was 1.4%. And that same field today, I think we're touching just over 2% now. And what I'm starting to see is these soil samples, when they're coming back, I'll say the last 2 or 3 years, is we seem to be seeing a higher increase quicker. So where, if we saw 0.1, 0.2% gains in, a couple, 2 or 3 years, it seems like we're getting those kinds of gains on a yearly basis. So I'm kind of excited about that. And that's been a big one. Something else that happened this spring, and it's seeding time quite often. Spend probably too much time behind the drill some days, checking seed depth, trying to figure out, are we placing it properly and well. But digging around, and I'm going to say this is probably getting into first, second week in May. So we haven't seen a lot of rain. Basically, the last rain we'd seen was about mid-April. And just how easy it was to dig around in the soil, checking seed depth. And it was kind of an aha moment, because quite often with our soils on our farm, they were basically 50-50 rotations, summer fallow wheat rotations when we bought it. We had a lot of soil that was quite hard and cloddy, and just from a feel perspective, I would just say we could definitely feel a difference digging around this spring in some of those long-term fields. So that would be, as a result of having more of those carbon inputs that, you're starting to see your soil aerate better, get better aggregation, and it's not so clotted together so hard. Yeah. But big one, simple one, use your agronomic tools, soil samples. They can definitely show you some of that.
Okay, and I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to steal one more too.
Okay.
When you're adopting a high carbon rotation, how long does it typically take to see measurable increases in carbon levels?
So when I look at our own farm, I would say, after you start throwing the high carbon system in, probably it's going to be 2 or 3 years where you start to, you might see increases that are sort of, just above flat when you're not doing it. When you start implementing them, you start to see the increases are more aggressive quicker. And that seemed to be about the 2-3 year mark that I started to see the start of that. And now it seems like it's on a yearly basis. The fields, just about everything on the farm is in a high C rotation now. There's one field I'm not there yet, but just about everything's there. And yeah, it seems like those are coming more aggressively now.
Good. All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions, we'll maybe wrap up a few minutes early. I'd just like to take an opportunity to thank everyone for attending tonight, and a big thank you to Troy for joining us and sharing his insight on high carbon rotations. Don't forget, our field days are coming up July 21st in Ceylon, July 22nd in Bladworth, and August 1st in St. Victor. You can register at sasksoil.ca. And we do this monthly, and our next webinar is July 31st, and Michael Ferguson will be here talking about how to manage your marginal areas. So thanks, Troy, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me, Tanya.
Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.